Detective Inspector Landis pulled a generous pinch of Old Holborn from his initialed tobacco pouch and fed it carefully into the bowl of his favourite rosewood pipe. Using the tip of his thumb to tamp it down, he put the well-chewed end of the stem between his lips, struck a match, and touched it to the surface of the tobacco. He moved the flame slowly around the bowl, puffing rhythmically until it was lit and burning evenly. Satisfied, he exhaled a wisp of smoke, closed his eyes, and rested back in his chair. Being a police officer had given Landis first-hand experience with some terrible things over the past 18 years. All manner of death and depravity, which the ordinary man on the street couldn't imagine or begin to conceive of. He had always prided himself on being able to separate his work from his private life, but since the loss of his wife, Erin, a year ago, things had changed. He'd had more time on his hands. And work, over which he had become obsessive, had started to infiltrate his weekends. For no reason beyond that, at least none that he was able to pinpoint, he had allowed personal feelings to creep into the ongoing Hallam investigation. The lack of progress was getting him down, and he didn't mind admitting it. In fact, he had been distinctly vocal about it when he'd spoken with Superintendent Nash on Friday afternoon. Just as he had anticipated, she had reeled off the requisite spiel about the benefits of tenacity and assured him that she had every faith in his ability to catch whoever was killing off Hallam's investors. But that didn't obviate the dispiriting feeling that he was getting nowhere. He had reached the point where not only didn't he share Nash's confidence in him, he wished he had never heard of Terence Hallam. There had been zero response to his televised appeal earlier in the week, although that hadn't really surprised him. It had been worth a try, of course, but no matter what the stakes might be, people are naturally averse to coming forward for fear of reprisal, besides which nobody would be willing to confess to their involvement with the Mastiga murders. His trip out to see Nick Mason on the Friday morning hadn't helped his burgeoning malaise either. Mason had made it clear on the phone that he didn't really want to speak to him again. He'd said all he had to say during the initial investigations the previous September, but when Landis had told him the ripples of what had occurred on the island hadn't yet abated, the man's interest had been sufficiently piqued that he'd acquiesced. When Landis arrived at Mason's home in Slough, however, the reception had been distinctly frosty. Landis had asked him about his final conversation with Hallam, and specifically whether he might have said anything at all relating to his mysterious cabal of private investors. Nick Mason had listened patiently enough to what Landis had to say, but he'd refused to let the detective speak with Kirsty or Charlie. He'd been able to provide ironclad alibis for his whereabouts during the murders of Partridge and Bamford, and when he'd shown Landis the door, he made his feelings abundantly clear. If somebody really is out there, tying up the loose ends, they have my blessing. But we've moved on, Detective Inspector. We just want to be left alone. Landis had left Slough thoroughly satisfied that the Masons had no involvement in what was happening, but even more dejected than when he'd arrived. Staring out of his living room window at the rain lashing against the glass, Landis puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. The crossword resting on his lap had hardly been started. He had only managed to answer 2 questions in the half-hour he'd been working on it. His mind was inescapably elsewhere this afternoon. Obvious disagreement for one in court, he mused aloud. 9 letters. From the coffee table, his mobile phone suddenly buzzed into life. Setting aside his pipe, he picked it up and looked at the screen. Duval. He tapped the accept option. Linda. Hi, Landis. To what do I owe this pleasure so late on a Sunday afternoon? I think I may have something of interest for you.